Hi, I'm Patrice Samuels, and I'm here with Mitch Karen, who is the CPO and the co-founder of Smart Rent. Smart Rent is a sponsor of Connection, so we definitely want to to know a little bit more about Smart Rent and sort of the role they play within the smart home industry. So, Mitch, if you want to just tell us a little bit more about your company and the role it plays.
Yeah, thank you, Patrice. And again, this is Mitch Karen from Smart Rent. And for those of you who don't know, Smart Rent is a enterprise home automation and smart building platform that's purpose built for property owners, property managers, residents, and their visitors. And in a short 4.5 years, Smart Rent has actually built 6 standalone SaaS products, ranging from smart home systems to access control to parking solutions and Wi-Fi. And we really come to the industry with an open architecture and agnostic approach. So we integrate with lots of third-party property management systems, CRMs, and Active Directories to really solve customer problems. And last thing I want to say about Smart Rent is it's actually built by operators. We're a bunch of operators and technologists. The company is also backed by the real estate industry. So we have a lot of customers, large publicly traded REITs that are customers and investors. And we actually reached a really amazing milestone a couple of weeks ago. We actually transitioned and became a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange.
Very nice. So Smart Rent plays a strong role in the multifamily or MDU segment, depending on how you're defining it, which is sort of a subset of the smart home market in general, if you will. So can you tell us a little bit more about what are some of the major consumer and sort of industry trends that you think are shaping the multifamily market or, smart home products in that market segment, as well as the smart home industry in general?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, overall exception and adoption of smart home systems has been amazing over the last 3 to 5 years. It was I don't want to say it was a taboo industry 5 years ago, but the conversations you have around smart homes today is drastically different than it was even just a short 2 or 3 years ago. And that goes both for the consumer space and the multifamily space too. We've seen such an amazing uptick on adoption in multifamily. The numbers of growth are huge, and the conversations again are completely different. We're doing less education, still doing some education on the market, but a lot of people are very well versed on what smart homes mean. And one of the funny stories I like to tell is when I used to describe Smart Rent just a short 2, 3 years ago, I'd have to start the actual conversation about, hey, are you familiar with smart home technology, such as locks and thermostats and lights? And then that question gone away. When I talk about Smart Rent now, I can easily say it's a smart home automation company, and virtually everybody, whether you know our company or not, understand what we do, understand the value that we have. And so in general, from a industry perspective, I really think the overall adoption is there. It's great to see smart home is becoming more ubiquitous. From the actual manufacturing side and kind of the more nuts and bolts of the functionality, we're starting to see a lot of the companies that make great devices on their third and fourth generation of their product, whether it's a smart lock, whether it's a doorbell, whether it's a camera or sensor or lighting controls. So we're really seeing a lot of progression and maturity with these companies who've been building devices for 10, 15 years. And we're seeing a lot of great advancements, not just on basic device controls or monitoring or sensor detection, but we're starting to see a lot of advanced analytics and intelligence to really improve the overall experience for users, both residents in our world, residents and property managers, and property owners as well.
Great. So certainly market awareness is helping to drive growth in the market. And you've touched on already some of the technology drivers such as AI and just improvements in these products in general that are really helping to drive adoption and growth in this market. Now, are there any other specific technologies that you think are playing a strong role in helping to move this market forward?
There's several, yeah. And kind of going back to what I was saying about the device manufacturers, as chipsets and technology have improved over the years, we're really getting a lot better analytics. We're getting better battery life. We're getting better reliability. We're getting better distances. So when all those things kind of come together, especially in our world, if you think about an apartment building, it's a lot more complicated than just a home. And so we have to leverage a lot of new different technologies than you may in a single family house. And so a lot of that technology has evolved over the years. Again, going, as I was saying, better battery life. You can improve where sensors can be placed. You can improve where sensors can be placed because the chipsets have increased long range and overall reliability. And so a lot of those trends have enabled us to actually build better products and offer better solutions for our customers.
Great, interesting. So you're saying a lot of these technologies have improved to make better products in general, right? And of course, you mentioned things like longer battery life and so on. So where do you see this market going within the next 3 to 5 years for the MDU market or the smart home industry in general?
Yeah, as I was talking about evolving technologies, I think first and foremost, the Wi-Fi as a foundation, which we don't always talk about the importance of Wi-Fi, especially in the smart home system. We kind of assume that a homeowner is going to have Wi-Fi, but especially in our world, where there's a lot of devices in buildings, we're talking thousands and thousands of devices within an apartment building. It's important to have a strong foundational networking structure. And while a lot of those devices can leverage low bandwidth connectivity through cellular, it's very important to have this very strong internet connection via a Wi-Fi network, a managed Wi-Fi network. And with that, also Wi-Fi 6 in the future, I believe, is going to help play a really strong role with that as the volume of devices, not just IoT devices, but resident devices. Each resident's got 3, 4, 5 different devices in each apartment now. So the overall volume of devices is going to heavily rely on technologies like Wi-Fi 6. Beyond that, let's talk a little bit more about specific products. I think from an access perspective and smart locks and access control, having Apple finally release information on how to add technology and credentials in the Apple Wallet is really amazing. I think a lot of people, especially in the access space, have been waiting for this for a while. And so it's really exciting to see them finally open up the technology and work with companies to improve the access experience, at least from that standpoint. Matter, as a lot of people are knowing now, it formerly was called Chip. That's getting a lot of steam in the industry, especially from the consumer side. It's going to really help interoperability. And so we're looking at that as well and hoping that can help improve some things on the MDU side, as obviously we deal with hundreds and thousands of devices in each property. So interoperability is always an ongoing thing we'd love to progress on. And just the last thing I'd like to touch on from the 3 to 5 year perspective is how much more opportunity there is in the MDU space. We really have barely touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of adoption overall. While residents in general have been adopting the technology and are accepting it in general, there's so much opportunity for the rental apartments and the entire industry as a whole to further benefit not just the residents from an amenity perspective, but help owners and managers better operate and protect their assets.
Great, thank you. And I'm encouraged by what you're saying, that there'll be so much more development with these enabling technologies that is really going to help this market go even further. Well, that is all the time we have. Thank you so much, Mitch, for coming on and telling us a little bit more about how you perceive the smart home market and where you think it's going. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, Patrice.
If you miss a live session, you can go back at any time to watch on demand. Go to Watch Replays and click on the session that you want to view. Have you created your own event agenda and swap card? Visit the Agenda and Watch Replay tabs to add sessions that interest you to your own event. You can go back to My Event to revisit any bookmarked sessions, sponsors, and items. We want to make sure that you're connecting with our industry-leading sponsors. You can interact with them by visiting the Booths and the Sponsor tab. You can also bookmark sponsors or add items to your event to view later. Sponsors have uploaded extra materials for attendees. Make sure to visit sponsors that interest you to chat with one of their team members or save documents for later. We have dedicated meeting slots set up for break times between sessions. Continue the discussion by requesting meetings from others in the SwapCard platform. Schedule a meeting with another attendee or a sponsor by visiting their page. The panelists and speakers will be addressing your questions live during the stream. During the stream, use the question tab to ask your questions early in the presentation. Go to the poll tab to answer polls that will be discussed during the live stream. If you need help navigating SwapCard, please reach out to our team by mentioning @Parks Associates in the chat box or by contacting one of our team members via our company page. Welcome to Parks Associates' 25th year of Connections, the premier Connected Home Conference. This virtual series will be hosted across 2021, bringing together a community of industry leaders in the connected home industries. In the 20+ years that Parks Associates has hosted Connections, the connected home has evolved from a high-end concept towards a mass market opportunity with incredible revenue potential. Today, several high-profile market disruptions are emerging as a result of broadband adoption, smartphone usage, and consumer expectations for connectivity solutions that provide a personalized experience. Our 2021 sponsors are making all of this possible. Thank you to our sponsors for their support this year. Our Analyst and Visionary Insights will feature executives in the connected entertainment and digital home technology industries. We hope you can join us for these upcoming sessions or watch past session replays. September 22nd, Home Networking and Wi-Fi. And finally, on November 9th and 10th, join us for 4 more sessions. Smart Home, Battle of the Platforms, Privacy and Security, Europe and the Smart Home, and Insurance and Smart Home. Thank you for joining us at Connections today and throughout 2021. We are happy to have you here and look forward to your feedback.
Welcome back to our Connection series. In today's session, we are addressing new innovations in home networking and Wi-Fi as it maps to single-family residential and MDU living spaces. Parks Associates research clearly demonstrates that the home networking and Wi-Fi spaces have evolved, with service providers offering advanced functionality and new services and capabilities built into home gateways such as smart adaptive Wi-Fi, embedded cybersecurity solutions, and services incorporating Wi-Fi motion sensing. In the MDU space, an increasing number of properties are offering these new innovative amenities such as complex-wide personal area networks, as well as turning to Wi-Fi to enable smart apartment functionality for their residents. My name is Mark Vina, and I am Senior Director of the Smart Home Research Practice at Parks Associates. I'll be providing my perspective of the market, and we will hear today's visionary hearing presentation from Shane Eleniak, SVP of Revenue Edge Products and the Calyx Cloud at Calyx. Following that, Elizabeth Parks, President of Parks Associates, will conduct an executive Q&A with Oz Yildirim of Airties. Following that discussion, I'll be moderating an interactive panel to talk about several of the most important topics in the home networking and Wi-Fi categories. And of course, thank you to our sponsors. Parks Associates couldn't host these events without your support. And in this unique year, that's truer than ever. This marks our 25th year of the Connections Conferences. Here's a big shout out of thanks to our research partners, as well as our platinum, gold, and bronze partners. It's also important that we want to recognize our supporters who we work with in different ways to help educate and network with the industry. Just a reminder, if this is your first session as an attendee, we welcome you back and would like to remind you of all of our events for the remainder of the year. There's still a lot to talk about. In addition, please take note that we just announced our plans for Connection Summit at CES. For 15 years, we have partnered with CTA to bring connections to CTS. So please watch for these announcements to get involved in that event. So without any further ado, let me present several of our insights that puts today's focus on home networking and Wi-Fi into perspective. I'll offer some commentary of the key market and customer dynamics driving welcome changes in the home networking and Wi-Fi space, how Parks Associates views this category, and then tee up some interesting observations that the new players in this category should ponder to maximize the going forward business opportunity. Before offering insights on the state of the home networking landscape, it's worthwhile to take a step back and mention the continued surge of activity in the home networking space and the tangential markets and business segments. From Plume's announcement that its cloud-controlled network has surpassed a staggering 1 billion connected devices, to Amazon and Comcast doubling down on smart TVs, Verizon expanding its 5G network for home network access, enterprise players like Palo Alto Networks getting into the home router business, Airties announcing that it had reached 33 million users on its cloud service, as well as Calix broadening its cloud capability with support for more than 80 gateways. The past several months have been replete with important industry announcements that underscore the importance, momentum, and opportunity in the home networking space. To put it mildly, we don't believe that the industry will be hitting the pause button on future announcements anytime soon. Let me now offer some select insights about the home networking landscape. We are unequivocal in our view that the pandemic has strengthened the home network value proposition. Looking at the past 18 months, Parks Associates finds that 26% of individuals in broadband households are now working remotely, both all-time and full-time and part-time, with 18% working remotely with another adult in the household. Furthermore, 52% of broadband households have children who are schooled remotely. We believe that while these figures may shift a bit over time, this situation represents a new normal and creates a ripe environment for highly desired, best-in-class home networking and Wi-Fi solutions. The growth of the smart home is placing more demands and stress on the legacy home network. The average number of smart home devices, ranging from smart light bulbs, voice assistants, smart doorbells, smart locks, and numerous other devices, is rising dramatically. Our research reports that the average number of connected devices has risen from 8.4 in 2015 to 14 in 2021, a 67% improvement over just 6 years. Our survey research asserts that consumers are taking matters into their own hands with future-proofing their home networks with faster broadband speeds. Our second half 2020 survey data indicates that nearly 10% of consumers reported signing up for faster internet speeds with more expensive plans, while only 3% of consumers downside their internet speed plans from a service provider, even at a lower cost. This dynamic has caused broadband service plan ARPUs to climb over the past year. Our survey results indicate and continue to indicate that standalone home broadband service ARPU levels on the rise. As this chart indicates, ARPU for standard home broadband service has risen from $47 in 2Q of 13 to $63 in 2Q of 21, a 34% increase over eight years. Parks Research survey data clearly underscores how broadband speeds have climbed over the past few years. While one must take care in analyzing self-reported download speeds, Parks Associates can confidently assert that faster speeds in the 100 megabit to 1 gigabit band level have climbed to 19% in 2015 to 36% in 2019, a 90% increase. Without reservation, broadband households are taking claim to faster internet speeds inside their homes. It's important to recall that consumer access broadband, they access broadband at home in a variety of different ways, from the traditional coaxial-based Ethernet to smartphone-based hotspots to fiber optic and emerging 5G access. Consumers often employ multiple broadband access approaches for flexibility, cost, and convenience considerations. Versus prior periods, Ethernet and smartphone-based broadband access are the leading connection vehicles, with 5G gaining steam in early 2021. Now, turning our attention to home networking routers and Wi-Fi extenders, which Parks Associates classifies as consumer electronics products, our data finds that these solutions continue to be extremely popular in broadband households, even outpacing smartphones, smart TVs, and smart speakers, smart displays. Our survey data overwhelmingly asserts that Wi-Fi is and has been the dominant method for how consumers access internet in their homes. As faster Wi-Fi protocols have been adopted in routers, PCs, smartphones, and other devices, wireless access speeds are becoming as nearly compelling as wired access. This trend has been ongoing for many years and is unlikely to change. In the home networking device ownership category, routers have climbed in popularity, with Wi-Fi network extenders and Wi-Fi mesh solutions experiencing surges in ownership. Among all broadband households, only 32% of consumers report having a whole home mesh solution, representing an enormous upgrade opportunity for manufacturers and service providers. Given the increasing consumer need for networking hardware, ISPs would do well to expand their hardware offerings and business models, as the leading reason for buying a router at retail is to avoid a monthly fee. When we look at the household broadband market from a purchase intention standpoint, mapped out against different user profiles, our data underscores that households with young children are the most receptive for upgraded routers, Wi-Fi mesh network systems, and Wi-Fi network extenders. Gamers who play on 3 or more platforms also demonstrate strong home networking device purchase intention, on par with teen children-based households. When we dive deep into the core reasons why broadband households are upgrading their home networking devices, a compelling 56% of consumers surveyed report that they experienced at least one technical issue in the past. Slow speed, Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi interruptions are understood to be the top reason driving home networking device upgrades, followed by coverage issues, device connectivity, and initial setup configuration problems. This environment presents a considerable opportunity for service providers who can offer a managed Wi-Fi approach that positions the ISP as a trusted CTO-like entity who can provide worry-free problem-solving, automatic firmware upgrades, and even parental controls. Looking at the home networking device paradigm from a usage model standpoint, our survey data shows that online video gaming represents the most potent usage model that is encouraging broadband households to upgrade their routers, add Wi-Fi extenders, or embrace whole home Wi-Fi mesh systems. Online video services, essentially over-the-top streaming, comes in at a respectable second place for home networking device purchase intention levels, with traditional internet-only service coming in third. The impact of heavy gaming as a purchase intention motivator cannot be understated. Parks Associates survey results show that broadband households with 4 or more gaming platforms show home network purchase intention levels at a formidable 57%, more than 2x the percentage of all U.S. broadband households. More than ever before, today's home networks are burdened by stress levels that can compromise the overall user experience, particularly in home networks with multiple users who engage in simultaneous and varied entertainment-based usage models. Certainly, the pandemic has fueled these average weekly hour levels during the extended lockdown periods over the past year, but Parks Associates does not believe these figures will markedly change as COVID-19 dissipates. Looking at the add-on service opportunity from an age perspective, Parks Associates survey data clearly indicates that there is a sweet spot for targeting the so-called sandwich generation, those individuals in the 35 to 44 age range. ISPs, especially those who provide managed Wi-Fi platforms, will find this group very interested in the 60% range in a broad swath of internet-related service offerings, from monitoring, network optimization, and parental controls to cybersecurity. Looking at the interest level in at-home services from a number of smart home devices owned, it's clear that homes with three or more smart home devices have strong interest in internet-related offerings. In fact, this segment of broadband households expressed strong interest levels in the 65% range. Again, the level of interest should be a clarion call for service providers who are offering managed Wi-Fi solutions. As we look forward, the tailwinds for home networking devices could not be stronger. With the pandemic, and while it's had an accelerant-like impact on purchase intention levels for new routers, Wi-Fi extenders, and mesh-based router system solutions, usage models play a significant role as well. However, Wi-Fi topology protocols are changing rapidly, which can be a source of confusion for many consumers. In fact, Wi-Fi protocol fatigue with some consumers may be setting in, which can be a drag on the overall market. Managed Wi-Fi, a topic that we will address during the interactive panel later today, represents a compelling opportunity for those service providers who wish to position themselves as a trusted technical support entity in consumer households. Before we move on to the next session, I'd be remiss if I did not mention the Smart Tech Check podcast, which I host on a weekly basis. This free podcast features great discussion with prominent journalists in the technology space, companies who are disrupting the market, and surprise guests. You can subscribe and watch the Smart Tech Check podcast on YouTube and listen to it on Apple Podcasts. In addition, we hope you also subscribe to the Parks Associates Connected Consumer podcast, which is available on numerous platforms. Thanks again for your time. Let me now turn the presentation over to Shane Aleniak, Calix's SVP of Revenue Edge Products and the Calix Cloud, who will be conducting today's Visionary Insights presentation. Welcome, Shane.
Thanks, Mark. Fantastic. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk to everybody today, talk about what we're doing, and really, I think it's an exciting time. I think if you look at Wi-Fi, you look at the industry as a whole, I've had the good fortune to be involved in Wi-Fi for 20 years now, and I think it's as exciting as it's ever been. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about kind of managed Wi-Fi, play on your themes, as you said. I think it's a great opportunity for the broadband service providers who have managed Wi-Fi platforms. I think it's an exciting time for the consumer and what it allows them to do and the capabilities and the services and just the overall experience they're getting today, I think is unmatched.
Great.
So, I think if we all step back, I think many people on this call are familiar with, kind of the excitement over the years and, how much Wi-Fi has evolved since, the late 90s and the early 2000s. And for me, I think, I kind of step back and look at 2019 and Wi-Fi 6 and I think much like 4G to 5G, it's incredible to see what you can do and how the technology has evolved, the chipsets, the underlying standards. And we see this kind of take form in multiple ways. In general, what we're seeing is about a 37% faster Wi-Fi experience on all devices, right? And we think that's just a statement of the chipsets, the radios, the designs, the FEMs, what we're able to do, the modulation and really the DSP algorithms. And that also shows up in throughput, right? And what we can do with multi-use MIMO. The other part, just we're seeing much better coverage. We're seeing a 20 to 30% increase in coverage. And I think that ultimately leads to just a great experience for the subscriber, for the consumer, or the business owner. The other thing is, we're able to put in a lot more intelligence around dynamic channel selection, look at airtime utilization, look at power levels, and really automatically change channels and move devices to the right channels based on their profiles, based on their experience. And we can do that in a way that's ultimately transparent and just gives a seamless experience for the subscriber. The other thing is we're now starting to see Wi-Fi 6E devices and Wi-Fi 6E APs. We're excited. We have our first units coming in November, but ultimately this addresses what I think is kind of the last part of it, which is clean spectrum. We've been working in 5 gigahertz for a long time. We've been working with larger channels and faster modulation, but this really opens up 1.2 gigahertz of spectrum. And really gives us the ability to steer low latency, high bandwidth devices into clean spectrum. And I think this combination of 6E together just is an incredible combination both for the service provider, But more importantly, I think for the end consumer, the end subscriber, and just the experience they're going to be able to see, I think we all know Wi-Fi is fundamental. Whether I'm working at home on Zoom, on Teams, whether I'm watching TV, whether no matter what I'm trying to do, whether your kids are in school, hybrid type of models, or you're just able to run your business now, I think having this high speed data rates, this clean capacity, this coverage just leads to a fantastic experience. And for us, it's really a combination about saying, how do you get that incredible experience? How do you get that quality of experience for the end consumer? It's about having the right systems, the right spectrum, and now really marrying that with managed Wi-Fi platforms. To your point, it's about having the insights. And I think when we look at what's possible now with Wi-Fi 6, 6E, when you start to marry it in with things like TR369 and kind of this evolution and thinking beyond world-class ease of management, ease of installation into rich instrumentation and telemetry, you start to marry it with data elements so that we've got kind of rich data models. And ultimately now what we can do is we can instrument and identify what is that underlying subscriber experience. We can put local intelligence, machine learning algorithms, and really be able to make sure that the system can adapt to the changing needs, whether that's a person in motion, whether that's a person, very different needs between my Nest thermostat and my 8K TV. And how do we manage really, delivering that quality of experience to the device and understand the application, the device, the Wi-Fi channel, the underlying network itself, then visibility all the way back from the device, all the way back from the device to the application, to the experience themselves, and really be able to make sure that the person's getting really that dynamic experience, and you're adjusting it, and you can do that in real time. And I think that's the power of rich OSs, AI, cloud-based algorithms, and really, I think, the standards are coming together, the capabilities are coming together to be able to do this at large scale in what has become a very complex environment. If you look at the home, you look at the business, the home has become as complex as traditionally what we viewed as enterprise complexity, right? I think, if we have world-class connectivity, when I talk about kind of the pyramid needs, for me, the next thing that once I have this incredible connectivity and capabilities is security. And we all need to make sure that the experience is secure. More and more we hear about, malware, we hear about issues, we hear about ransomware. It's become an interesting world we live in, especially as you start to look at a work from anywhere type of environment, right? And what do we do to support that? And, being able to have rich security, rich visibility into the underlying behavior, what device, what application, the packet streams themselves, and be able to protect the consumer and the business owner, we think is fundamental. And, as we start to look at that complex home environment, being able to protect against viruses, against phishing attacks, against malware, all of that's fundamental. And we think, it's an exciting time because all of that is, the capabilities, what we can do today, what the service provider can do today is really offer a world-class secure experience. And from our perspective, once you do that, you start to get to really interesting use cases, both the experience and what you can provide the consumer, but also what the opportunities are for the service provider to offer rich vertical-based offerings, right? You start to take these capabilities of parental controls, security, policy management, a rich subscriber experience, and you start to look at things like schooling, you look at entertainment, you look at connected cameras, managed security offerings, aging in place, energy management, right? And all of these really build on this basis of world-class experience around the capabilities, what you can do with Wi-Fi, what you can do with security to build on top of that. We're incredibly excited about what this allows a service provider to do, but also what does it do to the community, right? We've all, this last year heard about Zoom towns and really how important high-speed broadband has become for people and what they're doing in their day-to-day lives. But this really starts to take something that has become really a reactive to a negative and turn it into a positive, right? You can get world-class access. I talk to people about the fact that I've got people I know that are taking, just incredible Harvard courses, Wharton courses. It really opens up working from anywhere in the knowledge space and really starts to look at what can we do across all the communities across North America and into Europe. And I think it's an incredibly exciting time. I think the other thing is we can now look to go from Zoom towns to what I view as smart towns. We talk about, fiber and high-speed connectivity and high-speed Wi-Fi within your home, but you start to look at what does that do from a community effect? Every park, every school, every library, Main Street USA, Main Street Canada. How do you tie all of this together and start to give this capability that once you extend it with Passpoint and technologies like that, you start to get this connected experience that says, I can walk around my town, I can have this incredible experience, I can tie it into, EduRoam, underserved educational communities, I can start to tie it into emergency services, connecting all of Main Street together and just this rich downtown experience. And how do I start to bring this in and really extend what has become Zoom towns to really being smart towns and smart businesses and really offer just a very differentiated, incredible experience as I go from the coffee shop to the restaurant, as I go to the bakery, as I sit in the park, as I'm working. How does that tie into the local police force that's working on reports that doesn't have to go back to his office to get access to secure systems, right? How do we tie this in so that people can get high-speed internet at every library, at every park, at every school? And it really starts to open up some incredible opportunities for the community and really what the broadband service provider is able to bring to their community. And, for us, it's all about an incredible ecosystem. We're excited about what we're doing as a company, but I think the incredible, exciting part, and really my message is that, it's an incredible time as an ecosystem for everybody, right? And from our perspective, it builds on, this ecosystem, the chipset vendors, the access point and hardware vendors, the software vendors, the cloud vendors, the service providers. It's about having this incredibly healthy ecosystem that builds on top of standards, right? And we look at what's going on in the Wi-Fi Alliance and what we're doing there, Broadband Forum, IEEE, obviously. You start to look at the industry itself. We've got an ecosystem that has never been this exciting nor this healthy, right? And you look at the capabilities and how this really gives, a healthy ecosystem, flexibility of choice, knowing that these capabilities exist across multiple platforms, that the platforms really connect together seamlessly, and that you can not only offer an incredible experience, you can build a very rich tech stack with your vendors of choice, knowing that you can get really a high scale seamless experience and knowing that your vendors and the underlying standards are in place to do that. So from my perspective, it's an incredibly exciting time, both from the experience that the consumer and the business owner actually gets with the Wi-Fi, the rich instrumentation telemetry around the actual experience itself, the insights, the automations, the workflows. And then, I think that ties into security. It starts to build really, really interesting verticals. Whether we look at, what that allows you to do from a health perspective, from a retail perspective, education, energy management, as we look more and more and we're more conscious on our energy utilization, as you start to look at things like aging in place and the demographics of North America, how do we do best there? And how do we really extend these smart homes into smart communities, smart businesses? We extend this Wi-Fi capability, this seamless connectivity. And really, I think you have an incredible experience that every community just, not only values, but really, I think, starts to move us forward on what you can do and what a group of smart people in this ecosystem have been able to do and what's next for us as an industry. So hopefully that was useful and enlightening. Like I said, I think it's an incredible time in this industry. I've never seen, the ecosystem, the capabilities, everything aligned so well. I think if we look at, what we can do from key standards around Wi-Fi 6, data elements, TR-369, the recently announced TR-398, knowing with confidence, you've got world-class performance. I think you marry that with some of the work that's going on in Purple and Easy Mesh, and I don't think it's ever been as an exciting time. But also, I think the service providers never had more confidence in the ecosystem they have available to them, the vendors they have available to them. Every week it feels like there's more exciting announcements from everybody involved in this industry.
Well, thanks, Shane. That's great. Really appreciate that overview. Got some really interesting questions from the online audience. And before I jump into some of those questions, I got a question for you. I've been using the phrase "managed Wi-Fi," which is not the sexiest phrase from a consumer perspective. But what are your thoughts on that? Because ultimately, that's what the service providers are promising or committing to from a value proposition. And how does Calix position that managed Wi-Fi experience? What terminology you're using? How is it positioned within the company? Can you give us some color on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, for me, it's that connect, secure, manage, analyze, right? And I think manage is bang on from phraseology. I think we want to make sure we all have the best services and connectivity. We all want to know it's secure. But I think the tremendous value is really having that insights and be able to manage that experience, recognizing it's an incredibly dynamic environment, that the applications, 1 minute we're working from home doing Teams and we're doing Zoom and platforms like that. The next minute you're watching a brand new release and it's your movie theater. It's your children are doing Zoom. You're doing commerce, and being able to adapt to that and have the intelligence to be able to manage that and be able to have an environment that adapts to those changing applications, the changing devices. A world that gives you Nest thermostats and 8K TVs and everything in between. The complexity in there is just interesting. And I think the platforms, local intelligence, local software, cloud-based tools together really let the service provider offer that managed offering. And I think managed is absolutely the right terminology for it. I think more and more we talk about insights and the analytics part of this, which I think is the next part of it. How do you expose those insights to the consumer, to the business owner? And how does the service provider start to extend really beyond, I'll manage the service and give you a great experience, to what are the insights, especially as we start to look at businesses and small businesses. How is that being utilized? How is that experience? And I think it's an incredibly rich opportunity to extend what we mean managed services. But within Calix, we talk about them as managed services. We've been on this mission now for 6.5 years. And really an early recognition that if what we used to say is, if you were not in the managed Wi-Fi business, you were in the unmanaged Wi-Fi business, because you're getting the phone calls. They're phoning you that, and this was 7 years ago, right? Where, many service providers were suffering with customers buying the latest from Best Buy, connecting it, having issues, and then phoning the service provider going, I don't know why my experience is bad. And, I think today we're in a very different world. The tools that the service provider has, the platforms they have, the offerings they've put in place. But I think, managed and then analyzed are really the key things where the richness of this managed services are evolving to.
Right. Well, and as you said before, and what I alluded to, of course, in my presentation, the home network atmosphere has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. It's gone dramatically different from running out to Best Buy to buy the latest router and making sure those upgrades are put in place. Which, by the way, as you know, I know you have data on this, is that people just don't update the firmware on their routers. It's too complex. the router companies really don't want you to upgrade the firmware because that could blow things up. And having things done in a managed way from a trusted entity, I think that value proposition resonates with consumers. One other question that just popped up, and this is an interesting one because we happen to be in a Windows new operating system year. Windows 11 will be hitting the market very shortly. I think it launches in early October, if I'm not mistaken, and it's gotten very, very strong review, positive reviews. But the interesting thing is that it is going to embrace 6E, Wi-Fi 6E. Now, I talk a little bit about. I'm actually going to ask you a two-part question, and we get into it during our panel a little bit later. This whole notion of Wi-Fi fatigue, protocol fatigue. People who are in the industry like us, we salivate when a new Wi-Fi protocol comes out. Got to get the hottest router that has the latest and greatest capability from a speeds and feeds and performance standpoint. The average consumer, obviously, it's all alphabet soup. Do you really think that Windows 11, now that it's embracing 6E, which does offer some improvements over 6, will that be a spur, a motivator to more acceptance with 6E? I mean, what do you think the role of Windows plays with embracing a new Wi-Fi protocol like 6E?
I'm a big believer that the consumer devices will drive this. And whether it's the new Apple phone, whether it's new Windows, I absolutely believe that, having that support in the OSs, having that support in the latest laptops, the latest TVs, the latest smartphones will drive this. And I think it's the low latency, high bandwidth experience. Because, to your point, as an end consumer, I look at it and go, why do I care? But ultimately, I think it's that high bandwidth, low latency. You're not competing with lower bandwidth devices. So I think 6E is a statement of twofold. I think it's the available frequency, and I think it's the fact that we're not putting any slower devices on it. So the analogy we use within Calix is that it's an Autobahn, right? People who want to go fast like those lanes. And I think that's what people are going to see is those types of devices are going to get an incredible experience, and I think you're going to see it on, I've got I've got two 32-inch LG monitors on my desk here. I'm excited about the fact that Windows is going to support 6E, right? So I can't wait to get, I'm expecting, good things on my desktop, good things on my Zoom calls. I'm expecting multiple streams and those types of capabilities. And I think video has become such a key part of how we do business today. And whether you're a Teams fan, a Zoom fan, a different platform fan, we're spending all the time on video. I think this conference is an amazing example, right? We're sitting there, we're talking, we're having a great experience. That's by video. Like if we were all sitting on an audio conference, I don't think we would have anywhere close to the same experience, right? So, I think video is fundamental. I think having that high speed, low latency capability, and whether you're a gamer, you're a video fan, you're working from home, I think you're going to see real benefits for it. And I'm excited about it, right? Because, we've never really been able to show 160 megahertz channels, right? Like, you've got one. If you've got any noise on either side of that band,
you're in trouble, right?
It's going to drop down, right? So now I'm starting to say, okay, 80 plus 80, 160 megahertz channels dedicated and pinned to devices, to SSIDs with QoE behind it. I think you can really start to manage frequency and manage that spectrum against devices. You can start to easily group them against actual experience and start to segment kind of that low bandwidth connectivity, IoT, mid bandwidth from those high bandwidth, low latency type of devices. But I think the subscriber is going to drive it. And it's, I'm excited about all of the consumer electronics that are coming out that are going to be able to take advantage of it, right?
Well, and the interesting thing, and I alluded to it again in my presentation, is that look at just mesh routers. Mesh routers right now are a very hot commodity at retail, but only 32% of the market, at least with the households that we surveyed, have a mesh router. That leaves, of course, 68% of the market available for an upgrade. And what's intriguing to me about it is that, mesh routers, just to look at that specifically, they've been positioned really as, hey, they're going to expand coverage If you've got a 7,000 square foot home with a big backyard, you just put a satellite back there, and you'll have great coverage. The interesting thing is, and I spoke about this in my podcast yesterday that I do every week, and a couple of the journalists that we had online live in very old homes. And one person actually lives in Manhattan in a brownstone that's like pre-World War I, and it's not particularly large. It's only maybe 900 square feet. But until he was able to upgrade to a mesh router implementation, he could not do team calls effectively. So my point is that this mesh technology really has really wonderful capabilities, not just for extending coverage, but even with homes with old construction, which doesn't lend itself well to wireless transmission.
One of our largest customers is in London and in the UK, right? And whether you're talking New York, whether you're talking London, whether you're talking Boston, right? Beautiful buildings, beautiful old buildings, very solid brick construction. Very historically challenging environments, right? And we took the challenge initially, and we're like, similar, talking to CTOs who have these types of great homes, but just very challenging Wi-Fi. And we're like, we'll send you our latest Wi-Fi 6, our mesh, and you're right. The feedback was, well, this is amazing. I've got parts of my home I've never been able to get signal to. Just never, right? I knew that was a dead spot. If I walk into that part of the home, I'm going to have zero connectivity, right? And it just changes everything, right?
No, not night and day experience. We've got a couple of minutes left here. Here's a theoretical question for you, philosophical question for you. The role of security, of course, is so important in a broadband home network household. Is the belief that Calix has that the responsibility for really driving great security really exists at the router level? In the old days, people still download antivirus software on their PCs. That's still a very potent business. You've got now lots of disparate devices. I talked about, the average home today has 14 connected devices. Where do you think the ultimate, of course, there's no silver bullet for security in a home network. Let me just say that. But is the fundamental belief of Calix that you really have to have really robust security at the router level, because essentially that's where all the doors come in to the home network? I mean, what's your position on that?
Yeah, we do. And I think it's, there's always an opportunity for very smart devices, laptops, PCs, to have, application level, very rich security. But when you look at the average numbers of devices in your home, when I talk to customers, and it's the behaviors. I've got many friends who have teenagers. They don't load security patches. They don't run, right? So for them, it's peace of mind knowing that, well, my kids are gaming, or my kids are on Discord, or they're doing stuff like that, and I know it's secure. I also know my IoT is secure, and devices that, we all remember when baby monitors got hacked and some of those things, right? So, how do you protect an entire home knowing that, you've got a mix of, I've got devices at home I'm running VPNs on. It's my work environment. I have an IT VPN. We use Zscaler. I know that's protected. My wife's computer, different animal. I'm running virus. But there's a lot of things in the home that you're not going to be able to run local security on, set-top boxes, IoT devices, and also peace of mind knowing that maybe my teenagers turn security off, or they're not loading security patches. They're not upgrading OSs and virus software unless it helps the performance of what they're trying to do, right?
Well, Shane, listen, this has been a terrific session. Thank you for the deep dive and the questions we talked about. And we do appreciate your time and providing your insight on home networking, because it's obviously such an important topic. So with that, we will be now playing a short video.
Welcome back, and thank you so much, Mark, for that discussion with Shane and presentation from Calix. I'd like to turn now over to our executive Q&A discussion, where we will welcome Oz from Airties to join us and share more about some of their work, some of the research they've conducted, and where the opportunities and challenges are for consumers at home. My name is Elizabeth Parks, and I'd like to welcome you again to Parks Associates' 25th Annual Connections Conference. With that being said, let's go ahead and get Oz on the screen and have him do a short introduction, and we will jump into our executive Q&A. A reminder to our audience, we are taking questions throughout the session, so feel free to go ahead and add any questions to the questions tab or the chat on SwapCard. Oz, it's great to welcome you today. Thank you so much. And let's take a minute and see if you can do a short introduction of yourself, your role in Airties.
Thanks, Elizabeth, for having me in this conference. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can. Thanks for checking.
My name is Oz Yildirim. I'm EVP of America's Business Unit for Airties. Airties is most widely deployed provider of managed Wi-Fi solutions to broadband service providers around the globe, with customers such as AT&T, Altice, Vodafone, Singtel, and many others. Our mission is to empower service providers to deliver best connected home experience for their customers. We don't do direct-to-consumer business, but we're working with service providers to provide the home experience for the consumers. We've been deployed across 4 different continents, and Airties Cloud is actively managing more than 33 million homes with 650 million actively connected devices today. Our portfolio includes Airties Edge, which is a smart Wi-Fi software for broadband gateways, Airties Cloud, a cloud-based management platform, and its companion app called Airties Vision, and Wi-Fi mesh extenders.
Great, thanks for that introduction. And I understand some of what we're going to focus on today are the results from a multinational survey that your company did recently. And so really interested to dive into some of these research results you've gotten. So certainly the pandemic has changed the role of the home network and wireless in consumers' homes. And so interested to see if we could start off with just understanding some of those basic consumer perceptions from the research work that you've done.
Yeah, with the pandemic, we know that connectivity is almost as essential as water. People depend on their home Wi-Fi more than ever due to what we call enterpriseization of the home, applications like telemedicine, education, entertainment, and the need to stay connected with friends and family. So no surprise to learn that Wi-Fi usage within the home increased dramatically over the past year. As you mentioned, we've surveyed 1,600 people in US, UK, and Germany. And we could say 85% responded that they value and rely on their Wi-Fi more than before.
Yeah, that certainly aligns with some of the research that we've done as well. And actually, I was looking at some of our most recent data that's showing almost half of US broadband households still have children doing school at home. And also about 20% of broadband households have at least one person working remotely. So that role of connectivity just becoming so important as the pandemic continues on, and in certain regions, there's real limitations for people to go about, getting to school or getting to the office for those work activities. Was there anything that really stood out in terms of the big change that consumers have with Wi-Fi that you want to highlight?
We didn't find a big surprise in the survey. 90% are using their Wi-Fi more than before the pandemic. This is common across all geographies, US, UK, and Germany. Providing most significant was in the US and UK, where 93% claim to use their Wi-Fi more compared to 86% of Germans. When we focus on intensive usage in all 3 countries, we see that half of the people are now using Wi-Fi at least 10 hours per day. We asked people to compare their usage before and after the pandemic. Again, average across all countries, 35% told us they're using Wi-Fi for an average 7+ hours per day. And when we look at individual countries, that number was 48% for Americans compared to 36% British and 21% Germans. Daily use has increased the most in the US, with time spent up to time spent on Wi-Fi up at least 4 hours per day for 86% of Americans. We also asked people about their Wi-Fi coverage needs. 56% told us they have areas in the home with no Wi-Fi coverage, and they may need extenders. This 56% is actually 10% higher than the data we are seeing in our cloud system. And that coverage problem was particularly high in the UK, where 62% of Brits have experienced Wi-Fi dead zones in their households. What's also interesting is that 65% of the people are using Wi-Fi in new areas of their home. I mean, we were expecting that, but 60% was quite high. Especially this trend was strong in the US, with 76% of Americans declare they're using Wi-Fi in the areas where it wasn't used before, such as a garage and basement.
Yeah, certainly everybody is going to different places in their home, maybe to get away or be able to do their work. I've got some team members who have set up offices in their closets so they could work remotely when we were not able to be in the office. Excuse me. So that remote work scenario is really going to continue on as businesses look to the flexibility that remote work can provide. And as we continue on, we definitely anticipate businesses to have some kind of hybrid type of arrangement for their staff if they can. Does your research speak towards that remote work and the role of the broadband provider in ensuring that connection for workers at home?
Yes, actually in our survey, 71% expect to continue working from home post-pandemic, if there is such a thing. So we can see increased Wi-Fi usage is here to stay. This is a general pattern across all markets, slightly above the average in the US. Almost 3/4 of respondents say their employer is already committed to a hybrid or fully remote work model post-pandemic. Study from home was also a major factor in the uptake in Wi-Fi usage, as you also pointed out, with majority across all markets showing at least one home student, and 40% have 2 or more people studying from home. So we can definitely see it's working remotely is here to stay. We also asked people if they're getting any support from their employer for Wi-Fi or broadband. On Wi-Fi gear, 39% said they've been reimbursed for new Wi-Fi gear to stay connected. And that actually US was leading this area, with 57% of the people said they're getting reimbursement from their employer for Wi-Fi equipment. On the broadband side, 32% said they're receiving a subsidy for their broadband subscription. Again, US was leading this area, with over half of Americans who receive a broadband subsidy, versus only 21% of Germans said they're getting support from their employer.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We did a study of the small to medium business market and surveyed 1,000 SMBs, and definitely picked up on that similar point where companies are really looking to provide those stipends or monthly expenses to help cover their staff's ability to work well at home. We've also seen a huge increase in consumers going out and buying additional CE products, so laptops and monitors and mice and earbuds and anything, regards related to covering your ears so you can continue listening to that tablet or whatever you're doing. Those purchases have come in rates this year that we haven't seen since, probably 2012, based on the data that we've got. And it really does put the employer in a different position, and truly, some blurred and blended lines when you start talking about paying for employee services at home and, enabling that access. So I think that's something that probably will continue, and then will be seen really as a benefit along with that work at home or remote work type of flexibility that consumers are now coming to expect and say, if I can work at home, why not? It's saving me an hour on the road and driving, and I can, take care of other things with the family or whatever else they have going on. Tell me a little bit about the view in Europe. Do you think that, the U.S. market is very much there, as you've noted with your research, and we have ours as well. And the European side, is it similar in that way, or is this going to be lagging behind where the U.S. is, or is Europe ahead in other areas that we may not be?
In particular, in Germany, retail culture is very strong. So when it comes to buying Wi-Fi gear and equipment, we could see in Germany people still prefer Wi-Fi equipment to be provided by their service providers, but they are actually the percentage is higher for them to buy equipment from retail. But again, in terms of working from home, we see US is really higher than both UK and Germany. And the employers are giving better support for their staff to be able to work from home.
Okay, great. And all of this, ends up causing some support issues at times with consumers at home. Their networks are strained by the number of devices, by the use of their broadband services. And tell us how you think broadband operators are responding to this. Are they seeing this as a huge opportunity to capitalize on and build out additional value-added services to offer consumers, or are they more hesitant just due to the nature of the shifting world? There's so many changes at once. It's almost hard to keep up with everything going on.
Yeah, actually, we asked people if they upgraded their broadband service during the pandemic. 51% said they actually upgraded their broadband subscription during the pandemic. And that number was 70% in US versus just 35% in Germany. So we could see actually Americans did really upgrade their service, which was an opportunity for the service providers. And of those who have upgraded are now paying anywhere between 5 to 10 euro, pound, or US dollar per month for their service. We could also see willingness to upgrade for better Wi-Fi. 58% indicated they would upgrade to a higher tier of broadband service if it included a premium Wi-Fi system that guaranteed faster and more consistent Wi-Fi in every room. And this number was consistent across all three countries. But for us, really, first, major learning, we could see there is a strong demand from consumers to include Wi-Fi, smart Wi-Fi in the broadband offer. About 80% would prefer ISP to provide Wi-Fi gear over, purchasing through retail. And 54% of the respondents said they actually bought Wi-Fi gear through retail at some point. And Americans was actually lower in that sense compared to, as I mentioned, Germany. But these people who actually bought gear from retail, they still call their ISP to complain when there is a Wi-Fi or broadband problem. The other thing was the second strong outcome was to see demand for bundling whole home Wi-Fi with top tier broadband package. 86% of on average in all these three countries told us they would consider top tier broadband package that it should come with a whole home Wi-Fi service. And that number was a massive 92% for Americans. So people are really demanding whole home Wi-Fi to be bundled with the broadband package.
Yeah, and certainly our research, I think, reinforces that as well. Do you think that some of these add-on services or that are now considered add-on services or the premium services will start becoming the baseline service in the future?
It is already getting there. We are typically seeing when an operator launches that whole home service in a country, they typically start with bundling the whole home Wi-Fi with the very top broadband tier. And then the next thing you know is, let's say if the top tier is 1 gig, that 1 gig service would include a whole home Wi-Fi coverage. But the next thing you see that goes into the second tier and third tier. In advanced markets, what we are seeing is they leave the entry package, the first package. If you subscribe to that very basic broadband service, that you have to pay monthly fees for whole home Wi-Fi. But as you climb higher tiers, it comes with whole home Wi-Fi coverage.
Sure. Okay. Let's see. I want to point out to our audience that if you are interested in this research, there is a PDF link on the main screen. You can scroll down. You can also go to the Airties website if you're interested in checking that out. Oz, I'd like to take this conversation and turn a little bit more to some of the tech issues that we're seeing. So let's talk about Wi-Fi 6. Maybe you can just give me a brief rundown of where you think we are with Wi-Fi 6 and then the i6E and where that's coming.
It generally takes years for the newest generation of Wi-Fi devices to reach critical mass, but we are seeing Wi-Fi 6 penetration is at a faster pace. Currently in our data, there are an average of 19 connected devices per home across all the countries managed by Airties Cloud globally. So we're talking about 19 actively connected devices per home. And what we are seeing is Wi-Fi 6 is at 16% at the moment, which is like in 2 years getting to 16% of the installed base is pretty good pace. And 44% of these devices are Wi-Fi 5, and then 39% are still using Wi-Fi 4, also known as 11N. So really having this mixed bag of devices with different capabilities is really what makes the home network management this is one of the most complex part of Wi-Fi performance in the home. You have clients, brand new clients with great Wi-Fi capabilities, but they have to share some of the bandwidth with devices using Wi-Fi standard from 20 years ago, right? And that's actually what we are focusing our innovation is to detect different capabilities of these devices and making sure, let's say, detecting these faster clients and aligning them in the same lane, and then moving the slower clients into a lane so that we can optimize home Wi-Fi performance.
Interesting. Yeah, and the number of devices just continues to grow, and I think that interoperability issue from the manufacturer side is also something that is constantly being looked at, and really this promise of the vision of the smart home and what we all some of us for decades have been hoping for to achieve is really where these siloed ecosystems are being integrated together in a unified experience for the consumer that truly is a plug and play type of thing. There's not a lot that has to get done to make things work, and I still think we're a little far away from that, but lots of efforts to get there. Let's talk a little bit about
just on that. Actually, we asked people, like we could see in our survey, the consumer experience is still far from perfect. And 55% of the participants said they're experiencing daily issues with Wi-Fi. And 33% of all respondents said the most common issue was slow internet, while 45% had issues connecting new devices to internet, as you mentioned. So we can see speed and connectivity are leading issues for consumers. But one good news we saw in the survey was, overall satisfaction. We can say ISP's response during the lockdown was appreciated. 75% of the people think their broadband operator responded well to their needs during the pandemic. This perception was particularly positive in US. 87% was actually happy with their ISP's response. And we believe that's linked with early adoption of smart Wi-Fi software in the US. US operators were the first to recognize that they would need a unified Wi-Fi intelligence across their different gateways. You can imagine each operator has 5-6 different gateways coming from 2-3 different OEMs. So it was very common to see different feature sets exist on gateways coming from different suppliers. So one feature that existed on one product wasn't there on another product, or even if you had the same feature on 2 products, it wouldn't work with each other. So hence, ISP started actually searching for independent smart Wi-Fi software suppliers. And in US, we started receiving RFPs from US service providers in 2015, versus European operators followed kind of 3-4 years after that. And we could see again in our response that the Americans were actually, the service providers were able to remotely solve the problems for 69% of the cases.
Well, yeah, thanks for adding those details in. It's really interesting as operators looking to solve consumers' problems, and they know they are a main point for consumers and always will be, and certainly that added revenue possibility as well, with creating an experience that works and that consumers can value and also get support. I think is an important thing to note as well. Let's talk a little bit about 5G and Wi-Fi, especially as mobile operators are looking to deploy fixed wireless access. How's this going to work out?
We have 5G provides a compelling access technology to reach many homes. But overall device connectivity, we believe Wi-Fi will remain the dominant wireless technology within the home. We are talking about, 10 plus billion wireless devices. Hence, we believe, the Wi-Fi will be still the dominant connectivity within the home. And we believe the two technologies coexist and complement each other. We are seeing an increasing demand to use Wi-Fi to offload cellular data traffic. We have as Airties, we have major initiatives underway right now that combine Wi-Fi and 5G. To give you a concrete example for the convergence of the two technologies, we recently demonstrated the world's first proof of concept to automatically onboard Wi-Fi client devices to a residential Wi-Fi 6 network, paving the way for the rollout of WBA's open roaming standard across Wi-Fi networks. The success of this trial means mobile operators will be able to offload their mobile traffic into home Wi-Fi and offer their subscribers a seamless and secure internet access without having to re-enter login credentials. So what will be really critical in this approach is providing great Wi-Fi experience for both the guest users and the home users. And we can now do that with Wi-Fi 6 and 6E, as we can allocate a dedicated bandwidth for each client in our network, as well as the guest networks connecting to our home networks that's working as a hotspot.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I've got some managed services in my home where I can turn off any or all devices in the house. I have 3 kids, so that is used on a daily basis to help just control the access to them on their gaming devices or their iPads. So it really, especially for parents, just plays an important role and get some comfort knowing that your kid is not on the internet. And then, of course, what are they watching is the next question there. We only have about 2 minutes left, so I want to end our discussion here. It goes by so quickly, so thank you again for your time. But I really want to end this conversation and ask you about supply chain issues and the role that software is now playing. I think the supply chain issues, I don't know if we've ever quite seen them like this. But tell me how software can help solve some of this.
Yeah, actually, we are all going through really difficult times on supply chain side. But our approach in Wi-Fi optimization is to really utilize existing hardware in the home, which is the broadband gateway. And with our software, we are optimizing most of the Wi-Fi problems in the home without adding any additional hardware like extenders. So we are also selling extenders, but our first approach is how do we optimize Wi-Fi without installing any additional hardware? And things like interference, client connectivity, steering, these are all the things we can optimize with our software. And for the parts that we cannot solve with just software solution, then what we are doing on our side is our extenders. When we look at our mesh deployments, our average number of extenders per household is 1.2. So it's really critical to solve the Wi-Fi problem with least amount of additional hardware to optimize the total cost of ownership for the service providers. So we believe really, supply chain problems are here. There is no way other than better planning, better forecasting. But to cope with the problem, optimizing with software and solving the problem with lesser number of extenders and mesh APs is way to go.
Well, great. Well, Oz, that's going to be the last word from you here, but I know you're joining our panel next. So again, I want to thank you for your time today. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. Give us just a minute and we will be back for our hour-long interactive discussion with Mark Vina, our Senior Director of Smart Home Practice here at Parks Associates. Thank you again for joining us.
Welcome back to our Connection series. Again, my name is Mark Vina, Senior Director of the Smart Home Research Practice at Parks Associates. Today's panel will focus on addressing the technology innovations, challenges, and opportunities in the home networking and Wi-Fi spaces, particularly as it maps to single-family residential and MDU living spaces. In other words, where precisely is the home networking category headed? With that, let me give our esteemed panelist team, and thank you very much for joining us, to introduce themselves, and we'll start right off with Justin.
Well, thanks for having me. I don't know if we're going to be presenting the introduction slide. Oh, here it is.
Yeah,
So
there you
just a quick introduction for those who aren't familiar with what Nokia does in this space. So obviously we're very well known as being a telecommunications infrastructure provider. Within our fixed networks division, we have a broadband devices group, which is what I'm a part of. We focus on basically two broadband technologies primarily, as well as Wi-Fi. So fiber technology, Nokia and former Alcatel-Lucent, which was acquired by Nokia, is a leader in fiber to the home and fiber access technology. And we are also a leader in optical network terminals that terminate the fiber at the premise. So that's a big business unit for us. We're also a leader in 5G related fixed wireless access, so bringing broadband to the home via the mobile networks. So we work closely with our mobile networks division, but specifically bringing that in the home via both gateways as well as external outdoor receivers, and then Wi-Fi. I have an interesting role within the group because not only do I drive the Wi-Fi beacons themselves, which are both gateways as well as mesh APs, I'm also responsible for the Wi-Fi technology that sits across all devices, the cloud control, specifically managed Wi-Fi, which has been discussed heavily today, as well as a new home networking operating system that's going to be consistent across all devices. So really looking forward to the panel today, and thanks for having me again.
Thank you, Justin. Pravat.
Right. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me. I'm with McAfee. We actually deal with a fascinating problem of solving a security problem for customers with smart home and new device adoption, and how the online usage of consumers have really changed, especially with a boost in the pandemic. It has created some new emerging trends on what the threat landscape looks like, how we protect. So we are a global leader in online protection. Our mission is really to keep everyone online safe so that people can do what they want to do, whether it's browse or shop or do anything else. We do that from a combination of providing support not only from a devices, from an anti-malware standpoint, but extending that over to identity and privacy and secure browsing and all of that. The role that I play in the organization is we take our security services directly to consumers and also through our partner channels, through OEM and retail and ISP and telcos. So I'm looking after the channel distribution and the channel success and how we drive business there and reach as many consumers as we can to keep them protected from it. So thank you for having me. I look forward to having a discussion about smart home and what the role of cybersecurity prevention really means in smart home.
Thank you again, Pravat. So let's bring up Ali.
Hi, I'm Ali Reyes. I'm the Director of Global Portfolio Strategy at Linksys. And just a little bit about Linksys. It's been in the networking industry for many years now. And we continue to drive innovation in this space, and that has never been more needed as we go, as we come out of these past 18 months here. We were the first to sell 100 million routers, to launch Wi-Fi motion sensing in our products. We continue to be inspired by our mission to connect everyone securely, which again continues to grow and grow and grow in importance. We're really looking and evaluating. We're at this intersection right now with how much time we're spending in the home and how much time we're projected to spend in the home as well, and that provides new opportunities, and we're excited to explore those and to build products. Very recently, we announced a second investment into Linksys from Fortinet, who is a leading cybersecurity solution provider, and we're very excited about the strengths that we'll both bring to addressing this need in the market. So excited to be here and looking forward to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Olivia is up next. Hello, Olivia.
Yes, thank you, Mark. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. My name is Livia Rosso. I'm the president of the Home Grid Forum. I do represent the community that builds on ITU-T standards, which has been created first back in 2009 on developing a technology that is addressing key needs of the telecom industry. We have been looking, first of all, at the power line connectivity, then went into the coax and twisted pairs, and plastic optical fiber, and then building that in conjunction with the Wi-Fi connectivity, so that strict quality of service, and we call that quality of experience, comes together with management features for developing these deployments of the service providers. So it has started as a way to support home networking technologies and went into the broadband access. I would like to develop further in the panel discussion how the topology is being built around the what we call the single family units and multi-dwelling units, and then went into the electricity utility applications. And finally combined, because this is a merger between wired and wireless connectivity for such a broad range of topologies and use cases, it is combining Wi-Fi and then also Li-Fi applications for very strict cybersecurity focus types of users. So it's a community being constructed and supported by service providers, by system integrators, by system vendors, and last but not least, silicon providers that are working on the multi-gigabit and above all, interoperable solutions for enriching deployments.
Well, thank you, Olivia. And we've got Oz up next, who's going to get a second chance to present, to introduce himself. Oz.
Yeah, thank you. Just to remind everyone, we are Airtie's most widely deployed provider of managed Wi-Fi solutions for broadband service providers. Our mission is to empower service providers to deliver the best connected home experience for their consumers. We've been deployed across 4 continents, more than 50 service providers, and our cloud is actively managing more than 33 million homes in the world today, which is the biggest cloud-based management system. Our portfolio includes Airtie's Edge, a smart Wi-Fi software for third-party gateways, Airtie's cloud-based management platform, a companion app called Airtie's Vision, and Wi-Fi mesh extenders.
Great. Well, I am absolutely looking forward to this presentation and panel. We've got a tremendous amount of intellectual know-how on this panel, so I'm really cannot wait to jump into the questions. The first question I have, I want to tee this up for Ali, and that is the question of what are consumers asking for when it comes to Wi-Fi performance and better Wi-Fi coverage? I mean, obviously, that's a loaded question in many ways because there's, they want more than one thing. But if you had to put your finger on it, Ali, what is the one thing that Linksys customers are telling you in terms of what's the most important thing for them to have a great Wi-Fi experience at home?
Yeah, so it's interesting. They're telling us the same thing. They just want it to work. And however, defining how to just have it work has changed. And so, they are using the internet in ways that are taking up so much more bandwidth when they're, streaming for entertainment, for working from home, schooling from home, as well as, at the end of the day, one thing that I think that also came top of mind, which we haven't seen as much of when it comes to thinking about your entire network, but is really the security of it, right? When you see news stories of, Zoom for your kids being hacked, that's concerning, right? That's top of mind for you. That feels very real. And so, we see those demands growing. So it's bandwidth and it's security, but then we also are seeing that, and it's interesting, it's evolving. When we went into this, it was very sudden, and a lot of the weight was on the consumer to solve this problem in their home. However, now the employer is saying this isn't going away. Then we need to find a way to integrate this, into our employees' home the same way that we do on premise at our sites. And so you're seeing both the employer and the consumer have this motivation to improve bandwidth for productivity, for connectivity, and then also from a security perspective as well. And so we are looking at this overall trend of all of this coming into the home. It used to be much more separate. And so, really everybody's kind of looking for that security and that overall bandwidth improvement. And so with that, I know we'll talk a little bit about, I've heard you mention it throughout the day, but just how do they know what they want, right? And so a lot of that education and how do they get that has been certainly top of mind, and we continue to innovate on that as well. And Linksys has a lot of time with the consumer, and we continue to drive that as well.
And let me ask you a follow-up question, because you are the resident retail router person on the panel. Linksys obviously has a long and storied history in the router business. I've had many Linksys routers. I love the technology. mesh networking, and the word mesh to me has to be the most unintuitive word of all time, from a technology standpoint. And of course, while we're seeing, the market obviously is gravitating toward that technology, still households, at least our data indicates, that households are only in the low 30s in terms of people who've embraced it. What's the key message from your perspective to promote mesh technology, and how, what's Lynx's messaging approach toward that? Ali, is Ali frozen? I think everybody's frozen.
Oh,
We can hear you, Mark.
Yep.
I'm here. We can pick it
let
up.
me let me pivot to Oz. Oz can answer that question.
Yeah, actually, we started deploying mesh networks in 2004, and we started actually selling our Wi-Fi mesh APs to service providers as early as 2009. So we are really known as a mesh company in the service provider space. But our approach is really, before going into Wi-Fi mesh and multiple AP, our approach is really starting with the gateway in the house. How do we optimize that gateway with a smart software and Wi-Fi intelligence, and really start building from there? Because around 45% of the people do not need additional extenders. So we really start from the existing hardware, existing broadband in the home, make it better, more intelligent with software. And for the cases where we cannot solve the problem with software alone, then introduce mesh, add additional devices. And that's kind of surprising many people to hear that from Airties, known as a mesh company. But really, starting with the single gateway, because again, about 85-90% of people in the field are just using just one single gateway in their home.
Right. Well, now here's an interesting question. I'm going to throw this over to Pravat. Is that from a legacy software standpoint, security software standpoint, obviously for years and years, people were kind of trained that you got to put antivirus software, you got to put VPN software on your PC, on your traditional, called it old school PC devices. Now the home network has blossomed into all kinds of Internet of Things devices, many of which sometimes have no security or very, very little security because they're being obtained from sometimes not trusted sources that have much more robust security capability. From your specific position, Pravat, what is the role of your company in terms of device protection at the device level, at the router level, at the whole home network level? What's the McAfee's approach?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I think the way you teed that up is you're right. Cybersecurity has traditionally been looked at device-based protection, also primarily an anti-malware. If you go back to the last 2 decades. But if you look at that, the whole home security, there's 2 aspects to that. One is obviously a protection from the connected devices. As you said, we're seeing IoT devices, number of devices really connecting from home because of the pandemic has obviously increased. So that is one aspect of the protection. The other aspect of the protection is really protecting the people and not just on devices. Devices are an important avenue for them to get online, but it is all those device agnostic or device independent elements like their identity and privacy. That is also a big focus area for us. So let me touch upon both of them, right?
Please.
Look, because of remote work, remote education, we have seen the average number of devices being online has really drastically increased. We are also seeing a steady explosion of IoT devices, which are really continuing to replace the traditional manual way of doing things and just improving the quality of life. Like from our deployment, we see that on an average, we see about 25 to 30 devices per home connecting to the Wi-Fi network. And like you said, IoT devices, they're devices with smaller system resources. There is no security software running on them. Most of them come with a default username, password that consumers don't even really make it a point to change. So while it's good that additional devices in the home are really adding to that connectivity and options for people, it also increases the risk surface area for the home with every new device connecting online, right? And this is where a router-based security really comes handy from a device standpoint in order to get visibility of the network, like how many devices are connected, is a new device connecting, what those devices are, what kind of security policy I want to apply, so that we can take a preventative approach. And then when something happens, we need to get alerted, whether we are at home or we are somewhere out away, we need to get alerted on a mobile phone so that we can take some action about it. So that is the device protection standpoint of cybersecurity from a smart home. But if you look at it from a people standpoint, the number of people who are now connecting from home has increased. And from our research, we see that the online activity, about 49% of the consumers, their online transaction, online purchases has increased multifold. Yet about 3/4 of the consumers we surveyed, they don't feel that they are really protected. They're concerned about protecting their data online. As they're going on social networks, as they're doing remote purchase, entertainment, education, they're sharing their identity, they're sharing data about themselves, but they are concerned about how do I protect them online. And they're looking for solutions there. And in fact, in our survey, what came out is that while device protection, malware protection has been top of mind for a long time, it needs to be there, but protection against identity and privacy is really top of mind for consumers. So what we are doing from our standpoint is we have a combination of endpoint protection, network-based protection, and protection around people's activities, identity, privacy, all encompassed in a single unified experience, like Ali was talking about. So that from a consumer standpoint, the burden of security management should not be their burden. Like when I think of my mom trying to figure out if I need to turn on VPN for a particular transaction or not, I think that's a lot of cognitive load on her. Instead, the stance we are taking is, how do we make our protection intelligent so that protection elements kick in when they are needed and basically get out of the way when they're not needed, so the consumers can focus on what they want to do so that they can enjoy their life online. That is the approach that we're taking, and that's what we're actually seeing a lot of good feedback from consumers, and we're seeing a lot of adoption of that.
Let's and we've got Ali back. Ali, welcome back to the to the online event.
Thank you.
I want to flip a question both to you, but I want to start with Olivia. And actually, any of you can answer this question. I can probably even let the pull Justin into this discussion as well. This whole notion of Wi-Fi protocol fatigue, the alphabet soup, phenomenon that you live in when you're in the high tech space. Justin, let me start with you. Do you really think that the Wi-Fi fatigue dynamic, in terms of consumers really getting it, because everything is a combination of letters? They've obviously tried to simplify things with just going to simple abbreviations like Wi-Fi 4, 5, and 6, and now we've got 6E. From your perspective, Justin, what kind of role does that play in terms of kind of inhibiting people to upgrading to faster protocols that obviously can deliver a much better experience?
Yeah, well, and you mentioned it. The first thing I was going to say is the fact that we've moved to a more simplistic terminology with Wi-Fi 5 and 6 and 6E and 7 has certainly been a step forward. The 802.11 days are behind us, at least in terms of consumer messaging. But I think Ali said it best. I mean, most consumers really don't care; they just want it to work. I think what we're seeing because of the pandemic, work from home, school from home, et cetera, this steady increase in demand for speed to the home, and then ultimately getting that speed all the way to your device. And whether that's via a single access point, as Oz mentioned, a majority of households are still running a single AP. Many of those APs are dual band, so having great band steering and having great channel selection within a single AP makes a lot of sense. But for the homes that do have mesh, making sure that the speed that you're paying for, because what consumers think about is their wallet a lot, right? I'm paying $100 or 100 euros per month for a speed. And if I do a speed test on my mobile device, I'm not getting that, then that's going to be negative on the CSP, and it's going to be a bad user experience. So what we can do within this CPE space and mesh space is do our best to provide better speed to the end device without having to talk about Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E, et cetera. And I think as technology evolves and as service providers and also retail vendors like Linksys continue to innovate, we are slowly but surely providing that quality of service, that quality of experience to the end user. And at that point, the nomenclature is much less important.
So, Ali, just pulling you back into the conversation for a second. How does Linksys message 6E versus 6?
Yeah,
That's an important topic because many consumers might see it as one and the same when in fact it's not. There are obviously attributes that make it a bit more compelling. So from your perspective, what is Linksys doing around 6E messaging?
Yeah, so we're really focusing more on what problems it solves when we talk to the consumer, and then providing them with the right solution. So, we're really starting with the needs of the consumer, and then filling in the blanks in regards to what the overall right product is for them. And then they'll see 6E, right? They'll see the price point, and then they'll decide if that's the right product for them. But we're really thinking about how are they using this? What are some of their greatest needs, and backing into it. But we do continue to look at it. And I would just say, to kind of add on to, what everybody's talking about here from a naming perspective, just to kind of build on, we want to show them the right product, but then also hopefully our products, will eventually tell them, hey, maybe this would be better for you, right? We can see how much you have coming in. Let's make a recommendation to you. Really starting to take that out of the hands of the consumer to manage and make recommendations, because we have those insights and we can pull them together. So I think as we look forward in networking space, that is one way that we can look at it as well. And again, taking it the pressure or I guess the pressure off of the consumer to be the expert in this area.
Olivia, let me pull you into this. You've heard the feedback from your two panelists on addressing this question. What are your thoughts on this in terms of the fatigue issue, messaging this to consumers effectively? I mean, I like what I hear in terms of the problem-solving approach. That's typically the most effective way you deal with trying to market a solution to skeptical consumers. But do you have a view on this?
Yes, definitely, Mark. Actually, we see this from 2 points of view. We have the service providers on one end that are looking at the backhaul versus front haul connectivity, which is key, and how they do explain that to their own customers. And then the user experience, the quality of service, the quality of experience. So I don't know whether, as a user, I want it all, but whatever I want it now. So that's the low latency approach. That it's true that, as Justin was saying, that we are looking at all these different speeds, tools, and measuring the speeds. And when COVID started to hit us badly at the very beginning, I know many of my friends, to not say colleagues, were actually looking and checking on the speeds tools, and actually see how much throughput do they have. Is it really up to the challenge, the connectivity, when starting to engage in conferences and online meetings, and debugging customers and helping them and all of that. And so we started to look into the mathematical pictures, like the numbers of the connectivity of the throughput. But then as COVID waves went on, and we went through several iterations of that, all of us, and I think it's really valid and everyone can embrace these thoughts, the fact that we went from, just forget about the numbers, although the maths is all, the key part of our lives, but just look at the latency. So we started to figure out, this is not working now, I want it now. So whatever I was doing, uploading, downloading, sending, smiling on a video conference, I want it now. If that was not working properly, the user, doesn't matter what was the mathematical number behind that, the real throughput, the low latency was perceived as such. So that this is what takes us to have technology agnostic installations, to have terminology agnostic connectivity, because users cannot actually look anymore into, and indeed this went in from 6E, 7 having numbers. It really speaks higher, better to users, so that's great. They can know the higher the number, the better translates into higher connectivity for them. But actually it's a matter of how do they feel that, in terms of they want it now. So really the low latency, the terminology, for them it's not so important, but the feeling, the user, the quality of the experience, rather than the quality of the service, seen from the other side of the bridge.
when I hear the "I want it now" phrase, it evokes memories of Veruca Salt and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. But that's a different that's a different story. Maybe that's a catchphrase that someone can use in some advertising. Oz, flipping back to you for a second, and I want to pull in. I'm going to pull Ali, and then I want to get Pravat's view on this as well. As we were discussing with Shane during my presentation at the beginning, and my exchange with Shane, we're talking about the emergence of the managed Wi-Fi experience, which is kind of a modern 21st century way of comprehending great Wi-Fi coverage into the home from a holistic standpoint on a variety of different levels, versus the way the world kind of operated 10 or 15 years ago, maybe just 10 years ago, where basically you went to retail, you bought a router, you hoped that you plugged it into your modem, you hoped that it worked, and you were essentially the CIO of your household. I want to get your perspective, frankly, in terms of the pros and cons of each approach, because there are still folks out there that want to manage their own Wi-Fi experience. They like that control. They're more, of course, power users. But let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of managed Wi-Fi versus a non-managed Wi-Fi, a more current traditional approach to Wi-Fi coverage in the home. Oz?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I think really what we are seeing is the retail players are really helping us a lot, actually, because when we started again back in 2004, we started in retail because we couldn't actually engage with service providers, because the approach was our job is to bring broadband, and Wi-Fi is not our problem. So that's why we had to start in retail. And I think we had our very first service provider customer. It was 2009. And it was really difficult to explain that to service providers and why they should actually take control of home Wi-Fi, and why it is such an integral part of their end-to-end broadband experience. But it wasn't there. But with all the retail, hype and marketing support, especially after 2013, 2014, with all the mesh players coming into retail space, only after then we started getting, traction with. It became so much easier for us, for our business, to work with service providers. So definitely we've had a lot of support from our retail partners.
So Ali, as our resident, hardware router entity on the panel, what are the pros for doing a non-managed Wi-Fi experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually think one of the pros is that you are in control, right? So many consumers are configuring their home the way that they want it to be set up, right? And so they like that. They want to be in control. They want to have the insights, and they want to be able to have the product that's right for them throughout their home. And the cost is lower, and over time that makes sense for them. So and then there are various things of convenience, and so I think the service providers are maybe thinking about, how do I bring things that are not currently all connected together? And now that's more of a macro level trend when you start to look at security on for your entire network, right? And all the devices that you may bring into your network, and how do you look forward on that and really anticipate the needs and how much they've changed so far. And so we see that I think we've underestimated the consumer for a while now in regards to the overall smart home, thinking they just want it to be in one ecosystem and for it to be, simple. And they're happy, they're fine pulling in, products from all different manufacturers and interoperate and putting them all together themselves. So they're not scared of that, interoperability challenge sometimes.
Justin, I understand that you'd like to respond.
Yeah, I think we should kind of define what managed Wi-Fi is these days, and I think what the cloud has enabled us to do as an industry is remotely not only see what's happening in the Wi-Fi, but also optimize it for performance. And if you think about just the technology, going from single band 2.4 gigahertz radios to dual band, tri-band, 6E, etc. Also on the client side, you have Wi-Fi radios in every mobile phone and smart TVs and laptops, etc. There's a certain amount of management within any Wi-Fi configuration. In some configurations, the client is doing the management. It's determining which access point to hit or which band to connect to. What we provide at Nokia is a combination of what we call local optimization as well as cloud optimization. So for our service provider partners, any box that they buy from Nokia, whether it be an ONT gateway or a fixed wireless access gateway or an Ethernet gateway or a beacon, we have our mesh technology, which includes local optimization. So algorithms that are embedded in the products that will optimize things like band steering, client steering, channel selection, etc. Then we augment that with cloud-based optimization, which for the service provider does come at a cost because there is infrastructure that needs to be acquired and managed. But it really gives the service provider another layer of visibility for help desk calls, and then also for optimization, when things do go wrong. But I think managed Wi-Fi, there's this progression of Wi-Fi as the technology has grown, as the demand has grown, and there's different types of managed Wi-Fi. But I think we really need to define the different types of Wi-Fi, managed Wi-Fi, and really look at it on a case-by-case basis. But we like to provide the 1-2 approach. The boxes come with embedded local optimization, but to augment that, we have the cloud optimization as well.
Right. No, and I agree with that observation that managed Wi-Fi means different things to different people, and obviously I think one needs to be aware of that. But I'd like to pull Pravat into this because I'm sure Pravat has a point of view on this whole managed Wi-Fi question.
Yeah, look, I appreciate what Ali and Justin shared. Absolutely. Look, there are factors such as price, performance, available support, the cloud optimization, some of the things Justin talked about. From my vantage point, a con would be if it doesn't come with security. A pro is if it has security, right? So what I'm saying is, in that selection from a consumer standpoint, a security must also be part of that equation as they're evaluating whether they want to go for a managed Wi-Fi or something that they want to control. And when it comes to security, here is what I would recommend as a few aspects which I think consumers should really look at. Number one is security must be integrated in the router, not as an add-on. Look, from our testing, we have seen some add-on solutions out there. They have been known to have some impact on performance or throughput. Our solutions go directly on the router so that we are not interfering with the fast path or the fast switching, anything that's going on, so that there's minimal performance impact. Second, from a security standpoint on the router, you want to make sure that you go with a security that's from a well-known security provider that has good protection efficacy and good efficacy in terms of being able to simplify things for the consumer. Like how easy is it to identify the devices on the network? How easy is it for you to manage those devices? How easy it is to apply security policies on them? How easy it is for you to group them? Look, from a router standpoint, the device management, how you manage subnets and other things is easier. We would like the security to be integrated as part of that. As you are creating different groups of devices on how you want to manage, you should be able to apply policies in those settings as not basically going device to device. And lastly, I would say that bringing that manageability even into the router management app. The application that you're using to manage your Wi-Fi, manage your settings, security should be integrated also into that, so you have one-stop shop to go to, as opposed to managing two different ones which could be disconnected. So from my perspective, look, whether it's managed or controlled, security is an important aspect. And also the security should not be restricted only to router, only to the devices in home. It should also have an option for consumers to be able to extend that protection when they're away from home, when they're away from the home network. They should have the same coverage on the devices that they're carrying with them, and they should also be able to alert and manage security incidents happening at home when they're away. I would say those are the big considerations from my perspective on how you should go choose whether it's a managed Wi-Fi or not.
Olivia, do you have a perspective on this whole managed Wi-Fi question?
Sure, Mark. From our standpoint, the Home Grid Forum members, we actually look at the Wi-Fi managed in the sense that we can control. I mean, it's a controller software with intelligent decision-making algorithms. So that's important. So of course, to make the mesh network self-organizing. But when I look at the self-organizing network, we look at the backhaul and front haul links. Why we do that? Because as they do get automatically selected and arranged and then optimized by the controller algorithms that make such decisions in an informed way based on the capabilities of the devices, of the individual usage, and of course we know that the traffic load environment that can get measured locally. As we look at the backhaul and front haul links, then we see the controller needing to automatically select lightly loaded Wi-Fi channels for front haul links, then offer users the best performance. So we look at this from that perspective. So then, of course, the Home Grid Forum members are using this G.HN technology standard from ITU-T, which is actually embedding the usage of the existing infrastructure, whether that's an AC means, whether that's a coax or a, twisted pair plastic optical fiber, the wired connectivity as a backhaul, as a way to free offload keep the front haul for the Wi-Fi, for the real Wi-Fi experience, for the real quality of experience. So that's important for us. So optimizing the backhaul links using the mesh and using the wired connectivity so that what is convenient for placing extenders in especially when you look at the single family unit and the multi-dwelling unit. So when you have that all the intense usage and then so many different devices in a single apartment that are there to occupy and load the available Wi-Fi channels, it's important then to have a strategy that in a dense environment, in a very high dense, whether that's apartment or MDU, to preserve the Wi-Fi channels, and that's the word I like to use as a conclusion, to preserve the Wi-Fi channels for use as front haul links.
And just to remind everyone who's watching online, please type in your questions in the chat box, because we will be taking some interactive questions online. And I am getting one question, and maybe just back to you. I think it was for Olivia. How do you see the rollout of AFC use with Wi-Fi 6E? Do you see a correlation between the two?
Yes, very good question. Yes, I actually see that. And the Home Grid Forum members have started to deploy the AC, so the AC with the Wi-Fi already for so many different versions of that. And now they're accelerating into Wi-Fi 6 and 6E precisely after having seen the need for this convergence. So the industry as such has spent so many years and efforts in terms of resources and the brainstorming and field trials and connectivity trials on having to split between Wi-Fi only or wired only, whether that's any type of wireless and any types of wired. I don't want to go into that comparison between different technologies. But what's important here is actually to understand that after so many years, and I have been witnessing that, the players came to a point of understanding, and I'm hoping I'm going to see that in every different environments of the deployments. They're starting to see the need for a convergence for end-to-end connectivity. So it's not just a matter of choosing one or another, it's a matter of having this wired and wireless connectivity embedded in a single device. So of course, as we see that on the AC and Wi-Fi 6, and we see that of course also on the coax and phone line, as I said, on the extending of the connectivity. Also, when we have service providers getting the connectivity to the building units, to the apartment buildings in one way or another. Sometimes they do that with the fixed wireless access at the roof. Other times they do that with the fiber connectivity, so fiber to the building as we know it. And then extending that inside the building with a convergence between Wi-Fi and 5G, as we know, but also between what we call the G.HN technology on our side, so the AC or the coax or the phone line, plus the Wi-Fi 6E, all that embedded. So members of the Home Grid Forum have already started to get engaged in these deployments, so that the software of those devices is actually able to seamlessly decide at any single point in time that according to the usage of each device, according to the streams that are actually going to load on the connectivity, what is best to use to offload when it's needed, and when it's not needed to do other smart optimization of the network. Because as we look into the self-organizing network, part of that is the convergence of combining technologies, not comparing technologies, but combining and complementing technologies. So AC and GHN is part of that challenge.
We got a question over here that I want to, if my producers in the back can bring the question up about, there we go, thank you. One of the things about that's really annoying, and we have data on this, that's annoying about using your day in, day out routers, connection dropping on and off happens during calls, happens in the middle of online seminars like the one we're having right now. But the mesh network does have the promise of correcting that from a coverage standpoint. There are other issues that go into it. But the question I'm being asked is, what happens if the mesh network doesn't work with specific products? Is the consumer calling the hardware company or the service provider? And let me hand that off to Oz, because I am sure he's gotten that question several times.
Yes. I mean, we as Airties, we are like Intel Inside. So our brand is not front and center for the consumers in most of the cases. So we are behind the scenes. Our software is integrated into a third-party gateway. So from our standpoint, customers are not able to differentiate Wi-Fi problems from broadband problems. So what we are seeing is customers are demanding that to be provided by their broadband service providers. And when they see problems, that they call their service providers immediately.
Now, I got to go to Ali, because Ali is our router person on the call. So from a Linksys perspective, what happens when I have that problem? And to Oz's point, making the distinction between, is it my internet connection, the pipe to the house, or is it something related to the router and the Wi-Fi coverage? So how does Linksys approach that problem?
Yeah, so I mean, typically just the consumer is more aware of who their internet provider is than who made that piece of hardware that's sitting there. It's obviously something that we work on a lot, but they're typically providing other services to them as well. So they do reach out to their service provider first, and that can honestly sometimes create frustration. So by the time they come to us, they're extra frustrated. But we do have a number of tools. We work very hard on how we support the customer, really making sure that we give them a great experience throughout that time. But where it's coming from, at this point, there are so many new ways to provide internet with 5G starting to roll out, that we there's so many different ways that they're accessing the internet, that whether it's the mesh or whether it's the service provider, it's really a toss up. But I know everybody's innovating and working hard to be able to solve those problems for the consumer.
Let me take it up about 5,000 feet. We've been talking a lot about the technology implementation, customer experience, and managed Wi-Fi versus non-managed Wi-Fi. I mean, it's been a great conversation so far. Let's put on our crystal ball caps, so to speak, and talk about the emerging usage models that are coming down the pipe that are starting to emerge. Maybe even usage models that are not fully here yet, but will be coming. That will place additional strain on the home network and put additional burden on performance in the home. What are some of the usage model capabilities that you see down the road, or are now just coming into fruition, that will impact this kind of excitement and acceleration of people embracing better Wi-Fi solutions in their home? So Justin, let me tee that up with you to see what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, so we're seeing a pretty interesting change in the market, and we can talk about the disaggregation of hardware and software, and also the separation of operating system from application. And we've been spending at Nokia within the Broadband Devices Group a significant amount of time on this kind of phenomenon that's occurring in the marketplace. So many service providers are looking to leverage strengths of different companies and putting pieces of the puzzle together. And one of the key technologies that's becoming much more available in the market at the CPE level is container applications. Being able to actually push a security application, a smart home application, a privacy application over the air to a device in the home, separate from the monolithic firmware image. And this is an area that Nokia has been innovating in. We are following a number of standards in the marketplace to make sure that our implementation is not a proprietary implementation, although we're looking to enhance the way that we support container applications. But it's a way of really attacking this opportunity of end users looking for software and services in a different way. Instead of developing the software or developing the capabilities in-house, instead of, like I said, integrating it into a monolithic firmware image that takes time to build and test and deploy, we're starting to pull the pieces of the puzzle apart. And it's very analogous to what's happened in the computer industry, what happened in the mobile phone industry, and what's happened in the server industry. And I think the next frontier is the CPE. It's going to get more powerful. That gateway in the home is going to become more and more critical to everyone's work, school, life, even more so than it is today. And adding capabilities separate from that individual firmware image. And I also think Oz mentioned it by being able to augment existing hardware in the homes is a huge opportunity in today's market where supply chain constraints are real. And there are literally, hundreds of millions of access points sitting around that could use a bit of a software upgrade to add more capabilities. So I think that's the trend that we're going to continue to see.
Sure. Pravat, what kind of usage models do you see emerging that are going to place additional stress and create more opportunity for people upgrading their home networking capabilities at home?
Yeah, I mean, look, when we look at the trends, and my perspective is that smart homes these days, they are often like smaller instances of enterprises, really. When they have high-speed network, they have an abundance of devices, as we see about 25 to 30 devices per home network today from our install base. They have multiple users with, online needs from an education, work, or shopping, or leisure, all of that. And they have different profiles within the network. They have different needs for the different members of the family. And generally the head of household, whether it's a dad or a mom, they play this admin. So it has all the elements of an enterprise, but obviously at a much smaller version. That's what we're seeing. And with all those changes and the changes in the consuming patterns of people while being inside a home, it's really driving the complexity of the home network to new heights. And with that complexity of the network, the threat landscape also sort of in parallel goes along with it. That's why we want to make sure that we want to stay ahead of the curve to make sure that we can not only take a preventative stature from a home network on, hey, how can we prevent incidences from happening? But when they do happen, how quickly can we detect and remediate and guide the consumers through that? That is what our focus is. I mean, the good news is from a security standpoint, talking about mini enterprise, the amount of interaction that's happening on the network level and packet level and the usage patterns, there are a ton of advanced technologies like AI and ML that's really is going to play a big role, and it's already starting to emerge that they can do anomaly detection. Here is a home network, which is sort of a mini enterprise network. These are the standard behaviors that we should see from that home. But when it sort of goes outside of that guardrail, whether it's based on network patterns or based on types of devices or based on even firmware versions and what have you, that can identify an intrusion or an onset of intrusion that can then allow us to kind of stay ahead of the curve. So that is one big research area for us, and we're already making some progress there. Another aspect is when the complexity is increasing, the sysadmin of the home, they are not really professional IT people that we have in large organizations. So we have to really simplify it, make it very intuitive and easy for them to understand, to be able to upgrade the software, to be able to apply policies, to be able to understand when they get an alert and what action they can do. So that guided remediation is a big piece of focus on, hey, this particular smart switch is misbehaving, it's connecting to some IP address that it should not be. Well, how do we get the consumers out of it? Can we isolate that out, allow them to kind of upgrade the firmware or do something else? That is also going to be another area where we can bring in all the complex technologies and the security and the protection for the home, but we have to make it really usable in a simple, intuitive manner for the home. So that is where our focus is.
Great. I'm going to go to Al. I want to get Ali's perspective on that question, and then I want to squeeze in another question because I want to get their viewpoint on the Matter initiative, which Elizabeth was kind of hinting at earlier. But Ali, from your perspective, usage models that Linksys sees that are driving, the need for greater Wi-Fi performance and Wi-Fi coverage in the home.
Yeah, I think you just mentioned Matter. So, really thinking about the smart home and how that's evolving and the demands. It's going to start to centralize. I mean, I think about my own home and, how many devices I have sitting around that look similar, right? But all do something different. And so how do we either physically start to combine, options there or hubs, whatever may be needed, but then also starting to look at Matter and really centralizing these ecosystems and the interoperability that's needed. But with that will come proliferation of devices in the home and taking more bandwidth. So that's one piece in addition to the security, right? Every time you add more devices, you're adding more, access points to be able to, vulnerabilities to your network. And so how do we incorporate that at the same time? So yeah, that's what we're looking towards.
Sure. Oz, I understand that you want to take a crack.
Yes. From our standpoint, really the most important thing moving forward is measuring the experience of the customer. And that experience will always change over time. So that's why we are shifting all of our focus from speed, coverage, latency into experience. What used to be a good speed, last year may not be good speed now. Or, it's really difficult to keep up with all the new devices coming to market, all the new applications that are popping up. So that's why really we are focusing on measuring the customer experience and adapting based on that, demand and requirements without changing the software firmware of the device. So that's what we believe will be key moving forward, is really measuring the customer's experience and adapting your Wi-Fi, whatever it needs, maybe more, faster speed, maybe lower latency, but understanding the demand and adapting to that demand without the need to change the firmware, which happens every 3 or 6 months. So that's why it's really important to optimize without depending on that firmware change.
Thanks. Well, we only have about 5 minutes left, and I do want to get that question about the Matter initiative and your thoughts on it. So let me start with Justin. Justin, if I give you 30 seconds for a quick pithy answer and what your perspective on Matter is.
On Matter?
Yeah, the Matter initiative.
I'm sorry, I'm unfamiliar with the Matter initiative.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
Matter is this new interoperability standard that allows connected home devices to work together. It's gotten quite a bit of exposure in the press. That's obviously the promise, to make all these different disparate devices work together and work with different voice assistants, so you don't have to remember what phrase to invoke and activate a particular voice assistant. But let me, I know that Ali had a point of view on this. So Ali, can you give me the Linksys perspective on Matter?
Yeah, absolutely. So, this has kind of been the holy grail for a while that we've been trying to achieve when it comes to the smart home and interoperability. So, what's exciting is how many players have, put some weight behind Matter. And, we're really starting to see that, not everybody wanted to play very nicely for a little while, but now it's so many devices are out there, so many consumers have entered through multiple ecosystems. That's now to really take the smart home to the next level. We have to have Matter move forward, and it's good to see that motion and that direction there. So we're looking at how can we be a part of that? How can we be the backbone? How can we help facilitate that experience with also obviously working closely with our partners who are providing the devices and providing their ecosystems as well. So that's how we're looking at it.
We can't hear you, Mark.
I'm going to give Pravat the last word on this, on Matter. McAfee's perspective.
Yeah, look, Mark, I think interoperability is going to be really big in order to really solve consumer problems where they don't have to think about what is compatible with what. From our standpoint, we're looking at adoption of standards so that we can actually interoperate no matter where and how that evolves, so that we are part of the ecosystem, just protecting accesses and connectivity issues, but really adhering to the standards.
Great, thank you. It's really interesting. We just had a poll, online poll question. We had a couple of them out there, which is kind of interesting. We didn't really talk a whole lot about 5G, but obviously 5G is going to be ultimately an interesting alternative to Wi-Fi coverage over the next few years as it becomes more ubiquitous. And interestingly enough, the poll that we have here is, let's see, they're typing in numbers in real time here. Only 30% believes it will become an interesting alternative to Wi-Fi. That's interesting to me. Only 40% say no, and 30% are on the fence in terms of too soon to tell. So that's going to be an interesting thing to follow as well. But in any event, folks, thank you very much for all your time. I think that will do it for the interactive panel. We do appreciate each of your time because we know you each have busy schedules. And we are going to bring up the next slide, I believe. Oh, yes. So let me remind everyone that at 2:45, we have a networking discussion via Zoom. You should have an email that will give you the specific link to log on to the interactive panel. And we encourage all of you to do that, to engage some great networking activity with folks who participated in today's panel. The next sessions for the Connections Conference will be on November 9th to 10th. We're going to talk about the smart home, bridging platforms and changing the experience. We'll be tackling privacy and security, Europe and the smart home, and insurance and the smart home. And then, of course, if you're interested in some great research on property management and MDUs, please reach out to us. We've got some great research that will be coming very shortly. We're doing a survey of 300 MDU property managers. That research will be available in the next quarter. And of course, if you've got any questions, please reach out to Jason Paris, our VP of Business Development. We've got his phone number and his email address. Contact him again. And if you're looking for sponsorship opportunities, please reach out to Ashton Gambrell for sponsorship activities. We can't do these events without folks supporting them, and she would appreciate it if you reach out to her. This is a laundry list of our social media partners. You can follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and our podcast activity. As I mentioned before, there's sections on our website to reflect that. And again, we've got upcoming research, our Consumer Insights dashboard for the smart home. Our smart home tracker will be published very shortly. Modern broadband, shifting landscape is coming shortly as well. And as well in 3Q, our quantified consumer research presentation, Connected Consumer Changing Support Needs. So please be on the outlook for that. And again, thanks you for all your time, and we will see you during the Zoom call.
On average, U.S. broadband households with smart home devices own more than 7 devices and spend thousands of dollars a year on home services. Parks Associates Consumer Insights dashboards share adoption, consumer demand, and market changes across the year for 5 leading markets serving the connected home to identify critical shifts in these markets and in consumer sentiment by tracking the core metrics that matter. This consumer research draws from surveys of more than 10,000 US households, including trending data, sometimes reaching back more than a decade. Parks Associates offers consumer insights dashboards for 5 markets: home services, consumer electronics, video services, residential security, and smart home. To share a little more, we recently released the Smart Home Dashboard, revealing that 1/4 of US broadband households bought at least one smart home device in the past 12 months. And households with at least one smart home device now own, on average, more than 7 devices. This dashboard covers the extensive product categories active in the smart home, including smart thermostats, smart appliances, network cameras, video doorbells, smart smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, smart door locks, smart garage door openers, and smart lighting products, among others. We also recently announced the release of the Home Services Dashboard, tracking broadband, mobile, and other consumer services. This dashboard shows that as of Q1 2021, the percentage of US broadband households with standalone broadband service increased from 33% in Q1 2018 to 41% in Q1 2021, following the declining popularity of pay TV bundles. These consumers pay $64 per month on average for standalone broadband service, up from just $39 per broadband household in 2011, a 64% growth rate. The fastest growing segment of home service bundles is a double play combining home internet and mobile service. Consumers are placing a greater emphasis on high quality broadband and mobile services, which is building value in bundling these services. Both the residential broadband and mobile industries experienced substantial growth during 2020 and into the first half of 2021, with demand particularly strong for high-speed internet and fiber connections. And 19% of US broadband households currently bundle mobile and home internet services, paying an average of $128 per month. Going forward, 24% of US broadband households reported plans to upgrade their home broadband, which would drive broadband service ARPU upwards 5% year over year. Adoption of residential security services has also continued to increase following the COVID-19 pandemic, creating additional bundling opportunities among connectivity and peace of mind services heading into the second half of 2021. Our dashboards provide companies with ongoing and actionable data on the adoption, purchase intentions, and trends for key markets serving the connected consumer at home. We are excited to bring this valuable trending data and insights to the market. To subscribe or request more information, please contact our sales team at sales@parksassociates.com.